Tuesday afternoon in the S&P, kind of mainly sort of I think it was kind of just after the first hour of cash. And basically just a few of the things I was kind of looking for in the terms of going kind of previous to like when we were kind of opening, where in cash and kind of relative to what I wanted to kind of see in the market. And then when I was executing, how I managed my risk and how I was quite happy to take a few kind of losers in a small range before we kind of got this sort of resolving trend move. So if we just start with just a bit of context as to what I was thinking. So if we just start, this is the all sessions S&P chart. And coming into the cash session, I mean, we'd basically been oversold, been hugging this lower bollinger band for quite some time. And then we had the gap down on Friday, and we kind of closed sort of on Monday. Sorry, we opened Monday, and then overnight gap, and then we kind of managed to fill the range. And then we were kind of, very, very oversold at this point, closing beneath that Bollinger Band, opening beneath Bollinger Band, and then this kind of Tuesday, massive green candle followed. And on the cash, it kind of looked a bit different, obviously. So coming in on cash, if I actually start the 30-minute, a bit easier. So on the 30-minute, I mean, we'd kind of been seeing this progressive, further short positioning in the market, and kind of towards these lows here, we kind of really challenged in this kind of really tight kind of range, really compressed range. And obviously, given the kind of strong overnight move and kind of squeeze that we had, cash was opening kind of higher. We also had some Fed speakers during the day. Powell was speaking, kind of coming in towards the cash open, just after cash open, I think, actually at 2:45. And it was this kind of sideways in here, and this kind of chop in here, which kind of set the move for us to kind of push higher. And if we then go on to so if we then kind of look back here, if we look back at these, this kind of 2-day balance which we broke from, so the Monday, and this was the Friday range, and then we had the Monday, and then on Tuesday here, this kind of was a really kind of key sort of inflection point for me, was this kind of 2-day balance as to what the market wanted to do, if we were going to kind of really push from here and trend higher, which we eventually got, or we were going to potentially fall back into this range if we were really, really weak, which was, I think given the kind of structure in the day, it was kind of hard. It was going to take something quite hawkish from Powell or any of the Fed members to really get this market back into this range. Given that we gapped, opened above range, all these different things at the top of this 2-day balance. So if I kind of now just, if I look at our 5-minute now, just to kind of explain to you my kind of thinking and how I was executing. So basically, I mean, at this point, given the significance of the gap, I mean, I think it was about 10-15 handle gap higher into the top of this kind of 2-day balance, which had been progressively getting shorter. And yeah, I mean, so for me, the kind of the kind of this sort of tight accumulation at the top of the range was really important. And this was all sorts of different commentary and Fed speaking here, which is all kind of soaked up. And the market couldn't get offered on it. It couldn't, it wasn't necessarily hawkish, but there was kind of potentially a lack of, affirming of dovishness and cuts, and we couldn't go offered on this given that we opened up higher. So at this point, it kind of all set up the picture for, I think, for a kind of move, a further short squeeze on the cash, kind of break of the initial balance range. So I'm kind of going to focus on, I'm not going to show you too much to what I was doing in here, in terms of buying and selling in here on comments and stuff, but what I was doing was I was really kind of paying attention to kind of the break back above these highs once we accumulated here for so long, and taking a few losers in here, and then waiting to kind of this resolution move to really finally come about. And yeah, I was basically paying because we had broken the overnight high, fallen back into this range. So for me, it was really important, for the references, was kind of the top of this cash range here, and then the top of the overnight range. So this was kind of my little zone here as to what I was trying to work a position. And I'm very, very, very quick and kind of happy to pay 2 or 3 handle losers until I kind of get the kind of confirmation and what I was looking for. Because I'm expecting, in expectation for a kind of much bigger short squeeze move. So that was kind of the context of the backdrop of the market coming into Tuesday, after Fed's Powell William speaking. So if I bring up my ladders now, so like I was saying, I was kind of paying attention to the top of that block, that top of that bracket, which was, and the overnight high I believe was at 27, was it 72 3/4, 73s. So I mean, now that we've kind of had this kind of sideways range, and now we've kind of broken above it, I mean, you should have really been paying a lot lower. I think the top of that bracket was somewhere around the 71s area. And so for me, it was kind of a matter of, okay, right, at what point am I really certain that this is going to kind of break? So, I mean, the fact that we've kind of fallen back into the overnight range and now we're returning it back above it, it kind of suggests to me that we were going to, potentially kind of punch into a new distribution from this overnight range. And at this point here, like I say, when we kind of have these overnight ranges, then we start to kind of really churn kind of clear levels and areas which a lot of people are looking at, overnight highs, overnight lows. For me, I'm kind of looking for, like I've said before, liquidity to kind of stack above that, and then you shouldn't really, it should be very hard for you to kind of actually, you have to kind of be aggressive with it, and sometimes you can kind of be a bit clever, which is what I'm going to show you just after this. But after this kind of period, so this is in the kind of area where I was trying to work, engage a kind of feeling for what kind of participants in the market. So I think you can kind of see it be broken up. We had this kind of small little gap of volume, and we had this kind of much bigger traded area of volume here. So for me, my risk kind of sat somewhere in between here and falling back into this balance. So for me, I was basically just trying to get a kind of parameter as to where my short-term risk was. I was kind of waiting to see where, okay, at the moment it kind of feels like a lot of bids were getting clipped, and every time we were kind of trying to hold the bid and kind of puff the bid up, it kind of got pulled or it got clipped, and it was never really, that kind of stacking of liquidity above where I wanted it to trade out, which was kind of what I look for most of these kind of breakout trades, especially in these kind of conditions when it's a lot thicker, high volume still. We're an hour into cash at this point, so there's a lot of volume traded. For me, it was all about, especially when you get these ledgers as well, like the volume ledgers here, which I've kind of spoken about before. And when you kind of get these, for example here, this is like when we kind of ledged, we've been ledging these 73 and a quarters, and then when we kind of traded up and instantly got offered again. For me, this was kind of, it gave me incentive to say, okay, I'm going to scale out aggressively if it starts to fall back, just because of the amount of risk I'm taking on here potentially is quite, this could have a much bigger retracement before we push. But when we kind of traded like how we did there, it basically showed me what I wanted to see, but it wasn't quite ready in that sense. So like, at this point, like I'd be saying, I'd almost be happy to lift 73 3/4 when the bid was really right. And you can kind of see here, we're still kind of flickering these 73 1/4, and then instantly kind of going off it again. So my risk is back into this balance, and then I'm going to pay down quite quickly, and I'm not really too worried about taking losers in this area here, because I feel like I'm trading in the right area. So when I am paying down here, you kind of see I'm paying down quite aggressively for a number of reasons. I've taken quite a few losers prior to this, and also I'm just trying to manage my risk in terms of, okay, there's going to be a potential kind of range expansion trade. I'm just waiting for that point as to when it shows it to me, so I just sped up a little bit there. So it was these 73 1/4 which we were ledging. And this was actually almost, I was quite lucky in this sense here when this worked, because I was understanding like what I wanted to see up here. When it started to reload the 73 1/4 this second time around, and it sits there and it keeps trading into it, and I start leaving resting bids. When it traded me out into the bid, it was it kind of confirmed to me that this was a lot different in terms of, okay, so now we've revisited this area, and we're now now we've gone bid back above the 73 1/4. So as you can kind of see, I'm already layering my bids, and we're kind of flickering the 73 1/2. So we're not really trading that much size into it. But notice how we're down ticking now into 73s, and notice now how we're reloading as opposed to kind of instantly getting flicked down. So if this was now, I had again really tight risk again. Notice how I'm going to clip out half my size. If we start trending back below here, back into this kind of low volume, back into this balance again. So when we're kind of holding up here, this reloading here, kind of the fact that we weren't necessarily trading higher prices instantly, it didn't bother me too much, because I felt, okay, we're now getting this accumulation above the point at which we want to break. So this was really important for me here. And then basically what happens is, I mean, we push up, then we have a kind of a 2 or 3 minute period here of just of sitting and kind of accumulating before, then we get a really aggressive kind of rotation higher. So at this point, it kind of all feels like this is like very much like short covering position, which I guess you kind of makes sense. A lot of inventory on the bid, a lot of people covering positions potentially. And as we kind of sit here and just accumulate, eventually we kind of break into a new balance, in that sense that, okay, all the positioning in here that's kind of been traded and held, we actually start to hold kind of separate distribution from where we'd been trading. So if I just speed this up a little bit, and I'll just kind of run over what I kind of thought. So for me, this was, I mean, I didn't show you a lot of the trading beforehand, and also kind of going into this move, I was expecting a short covering kind of rally. Okay, so it's going to potentially be hard for you to hit highs and look to play aggressively momentum, especially just given the short-term trend. Given potentially people still want to sell this market, given potentially people, you know, also covering short positioning, so there's going to be people, you know, resting bids, etc. Which is why you kind of get this kind of slower accumulation positioning above areas, as opposed to, okay, really aggressive stopping out, which we do get eventually. But when you're breaking these overnight ranges and you kind of and you're looking to that kind of working area, it's really, really important. Like I say, when I reference a lot of times when you kind of see when you have cash and overnight areas kind of crossing over, which makes sense to you, how you feel you can kind of manage risk accordingly. I think it's really, really, they usually tend for me be the most kind of important areas, especially like, you know, there's a lot of participants who are trading both overnight and in the cash session, and this just tends where you get the most kind of, you know, interaction, because just the nature of these areas are the most kind of, you know, they're crossing over in both sessions. So eventually this move kind of pushes higher, and from here it wasn't really a matter of it was just like I say in my other trades, it's about just managing my position and managing my size. But yeah, it was really a matter of, okay, when you're trading in here, because you can get thrashed around quite a few times, and even when you say you maybe pay an extreme, or you feel like you've got out too much size, or you just need to kind of make sure that when you're in this area and you know you're playing in the right area, your idea is good, and the price action, okay, when is it changing? And then once it, you know, and then once you think it does change, you can kind of then make sure you kind of get new information. So the second time we rebroke the 73 1/4, my stop effectively got even tighter at that point, just because of the nature of how we kind of went up there. I mean, don't get me wrong, in some scenarios I would have maybe got, you know, I would have missed out on that because of the nature of how I was trying to get filled, but it was basically very different the second time we came around. The nature of how we held, and then the nature of how we kind of sat there and accumulated, and we couldn't, and then the kind of inability to kind of counter auction back into this balance, which we've kind of been floating around and backfilling in here. And yeah, this kind of little area of low volume which we left and broke away, really important for this sort of area here, which was kind of at this point a bit of a decision zone.